Just remember to unmute yourself.
Okay, we're recording.
Welcome everyone to our class on Sefer Melitza, and as we like to do, we just give a brief introduction because the books of the Ramchal are highly organized with a lot of categories and subcategories. Basically, the Ramchal has described two functions of speech. One is called the Haggadah, communication. The other one is called the Martzeh, a person who wants to motivate. And he's giving us rules to use to have clear communication and also how to motivate. Now, of course, he says that these two things overlap because if you can't motivate anyone if your communication is not clear. So this part of the SAFE is talking about tools that the motivator is going to use. And of course, there's going to be an overlap because the motivator, as we said, has to communicate clearly. So the first rule of a person who's going to motivate is that he has to create a sufficient picture in the mind of the listener of what he wants to communicate and then subsequently motivate him to do. So he explains to us that the first thing you have to do, of course, is have your grammar correct. But there are certain places in the second rule, which he calls hataka, there are certain places where language falls short. And you're going to have to appeal to comparisons or metaphors in order to get your idea across, because the simple meaning of words won't communicate the idea, either because they're too subtle, because they're difficult to conceive. They're on a different level. For instance, if I talk to you about Alom Haba, for instance, I have to talk in terms of Shalom, you know. Good. So he broke up the section here of metaphor into what he calls dimyon, and then in dimyonos we can have mitzat kesher and mitzat klal, which we'll get into. In the dimyonos part, in the comparisons, so we were speaking about different levels of metaphor. Certain metaphors he explained were karov, which means that you get the point right away. Like if you say someone's an Ari, you mean that he's has a very strong or a powerful person. Some of them are much more distant. Some of them are complete, which means that you expel out the subject and predicate and its nimshal, and some are not. You only give a mushal for one and not the other. Like he said that the corn was clothed, the fields were clothed in corn. Field was a pashut, and then you use clothed, which is a word that you borrowed from a human being to explain the fullness of the field. Now he's going to talk about this last category, which is called a parable. Okay, he calls it a teka gemara, or an allegory, and we'll excuse me, that's the last category, it's the allegory, but we did that last week. And now he's going to talk about, there's, let me see, yes, he says like this. Vehine, this part 7, he says, Vehine, kashiarich yoter v'yarbu hamamarim, nimshachim ze acher ze, b'sipur mikrim v'tanayim shonim, kulam. So before we're handling basically one statement, or maybe even two statements, but here he says when the author writes extensively and you go from one statement to the next in a sipur, in a story, explaining all the different mikrim and the conditions. So that's called what he calls a mashal. Like in Sefer Mishlei, Eishes Chayil, right? Eishes Chayil. The Yimsot goes on, 31 Pesukim, I believe, all talking about a a woman of valor. But really, that's the Peshat level. It's with the Nimshal, really what it's talking about. Is talking about the Torah, and it's using the metaphor of a valorous woman to explain what the Torah is like, because since the Torah is an abstraction, learning Torah is something that you can't understand unless you've done it. So you have to understand what it means to be involved in the world of Torah. Therefore, we take something you do know, which is Eishes Chayil, and we say to you, well, just like this Eishes Chayil have all these qualities, so the Torah has them also. Okay, and that's called a mashal. And these words, I don't know if he wrote or someone else added into the text, these words that from the Latin, parabola, and I left them in because they were in the text, but I don't know who exactly added them. But it doesn't matter. They're very helpful if you want to look up the specific term in the dictionary. Okay, or a chidah. What's a chidah? A chidah is a enigma, which means the nimshal, it's more of a riddle. You don't really understand what the people are talking about. Okay. Ke'inyan Mishlei and the Nevi'im. Here's some Derech Mashalim. Now what I did was because they go at such great length and don't spend the time translating all the Hebrew, we'll just look at them quickly in the English translation. From Yeshaya, so it starts off Karen Hayalididi, the Karen Beit Shem, and if you can see I'm going to just minimize that. I'll sing a song for my beloved about a vineyard. My beloved had a vineyard in a fertile corner, and he fenced it in, and he cleared it of stones, and he planted it with the choicest vines, and he built a tower in its midst, and also of that he hewed therein, and he hoped to produce figs, but it produced wild berries. And now those Rushim and of Yehuda is an Nimshal, judge now between me and between the vineyard. Okay, now, so that's a very long and extended mashal, and it's going to be explained very elaborately by the Navi. But there, at least we understand the mashal and the nimshal is going to be spelled out. But there's certain times when they're chidos, which means they're enigmas totally. And he gives an example from Yecheskel. These are things that you could look into more carefully. Now Hashem came to me saying, "Son of man, chido." What was the lashon? Lashon is chud chido umashul mashal. Write this riddle and this mashal, okay, and speak this mashal to the house of Israel. You shall say, "So said Hashem, the great eagle with great wings and long pinions full of feathers who had diverse colors came to the Lebanon and took the lofty tops of the cedar. He plucked the tops of the branches and brought it to the land of Mercer and the city of tractors by bow." Excuse me, but okay, so you have to get into that. It's a riddle. We don't understand exactly we understand what's the words, but they're written in a very high and abstract way. Well, we had another very nice example in Bechoros, for instance. Just in the daf that we were doing, Rabbi Yeshua ben Chanina went to the Chachmei Yavan, and he had a contest with them who was smarter. So they said to him, if a man tries for a shidduch, and the people who like the father rejects him, so does he go for a higher shidduch or he goes for a lower shidduch? That's what they said to him. So he took out a peg and he placed it in the wall at a lower point in the wall. It didn't go in, and then he placed it in a higher point in the wall. It did go in. Now, that's a total, I mean, we understand the words, but we don't understand what the nimshal is b'chlal. So the Vilna Gaon has to explain the riddle. And what the Greeks were saying were, when Hashem gave the Torah, he came to us first. And then he went to you guys, the Jewish people. So you're really second fiddle, you see, because when you go to make a shidduch, you go to the best people first. And that's why he came to us. Then when we rejected him, so he went to the dropout. Klal Yisrael. So Reb Chanina answered them, no, that's the wrong mashal. when you try to stick a peg in the wall at a lower point, it doesn't go in, so you stick the peg at a higher point in the wall, and it will go in, which means he came to you first to see if you would accept the Torah and give you a chance. You rejected it, so now he looked for a different place of the people that would reject it. So it has nothing to do with the placement or the status of the person who was being asked. It has to do with the ability to accept the Torah or not accept the Torah. And since you didn't have the ability to accept the Torah, and Hashem wanted to place the Torah into the world, so he rejected you. So that's called an enigma, because without the Vilna Gaon, I don't know if anyone would be able to figure that one out. But that's the second type of mashal. So there's mashal in which we understand they go for a long period of time, and their message is rather clear. Okay, and like I say, like Eishus Chayil is really talking about the Torah, and we can go through all the details. And then there's things which are totally enigmatic, which means we don't know the mashal unless you're real chacham, like Vilna Gaon, and can explain it. So those are the two levels of communication, and sometimes we have to speak at those levels in order to communicate our ideas. As we said, like to know what the Torah is about, the intellectual mind may not understand it, but the physical mind does understand certain things. So we can understand the physical concepts, like Eishus Chayil, and what a woman is, what she does, and what she's supposed to be doing. So then we can understand what Hashem wants us to do as a nimshal when we think of that mashal. Okay, so that's the next category, the bottom category. Okay, so that's his discussion of using metaphor. Okay, that was this last category here on the bottom called parable. Now he gives us an interesting note. And he says the following: Hine, I'm sorry. He says, "V'sarek sheteda, shehine yesh hadikim sheyesodim hadimyon ni muvan hetev al kain b'kol lashon shetomarem hine yiyu nechonim." There's certain comparisons, or in this case, Mishalim, for instance, that the basic principles of their comparison is understood very well, and therefore we can say it in any language. That's why we could translate Mishlei in any language, and there's no problem. I mean, okay, maybe a problem slightly if we look in the details, but basically the idea is what a woman does, and everyone understands a woman, a valorous life. She gets up in the morning, everyone can read the English translation. But he says, "V'yesh mene hatikim she'ein hadimyon behem kol kach boror sheyeyos b'kol lashon." But there's certain mashalim that are not quite clear in every language. And he's warning us. In other words, if you're trying to motivate in one language, you just simply can't wholesale copy the mashal and put it into a different language. Sometimes it's limited, the mashal, to one type of language, and it doesn't work in other languages, because it's not a mashal that's used in that language. For instance, he says kol gadol. When kol gadol in Hebrew, mitzanu b'lashon hakodesh v'kavanu bo kol chazak. When the Torah uses the term kol gadol, it really means a loud voice. V'lo yomar kein b'lashon acheres, but in other languages it doesn't go. You don't say, in English, you don't say, well, he has a big voice. A big voice came to me. Okay, you have to say strong voice. Okay, so sometimes what he's trying to tell us, of course, is that the literal translation of the words don't work in every language. Okay. V'lo yomar kein b'lashon acheres. So called a big voice doesn't work in English. U'keilu yemotzu b'kol lashon yuchadam b'lashon hahu. Excuse me. U'keilu yemotzu b'kol lashon miyuchadam b'loshonahu. In every language you'll find certain words that people understand what the meaning is, and it doesn't work in other languages. The people who know the language speak that way. You can't just use these phrases when you move them to another language. This is one of the big problems that you have as a translator, because if you translate literally, like in a dictionary, each word, so it means very little in another language many times. Okay.
Even within the same language.
A big voice.
If you have people in England,
yeah,
in England to speak English, Australia to speak English, and the U.S. to speak English, they have different words to mean the same thing.
Right.
Exactly. In Australia, they call the trunk of a car a boot, and we call it a trunk. And they refer to a baby's diaper as a napkin. So you could be talking the same English and get confused.
Right. Right. So that's what you have to be careful about. And remember what he's trying to explain to us is motivation is a product of rule number one, of clear communication. So you have to know what the expressions that your audience use, whether it be, as you said, American English. Every these computer programs, they say, which type of English do you want, right? American English, they have to spell
right.
American English, French English, not French, but like you say, Australian English, South African English. Okay, so that's a pretty obvious rule, but of course you have to say it. Excuse me. Now, va'amnam, here's another one. Od min acher yesh beklalo tachas ha'takak misad echad. There's one type of comparison that we have to talk about, which is has one similarity to this type of hataka. What is that? Omnam od min acher yesh beklal tachas hataka mitzad echad afal pi she'eno hataka legamre. Now, it's not a complete allegory, but it's going to have a certain type, a certain aspect which is like these allegories. It's when you say a statement, and what you really mean is the opposite of what you say. Okay? The technical word is called irony. Okay? It's like the comparisons that we've been talking about, because the intent of the word is different than what is being said. Okay, when I talk about Eishes Chayil Minim, so I'm really talking about the Torah, so there's a different intention. But here, it's going, that's the common quality it has with it. Don't look at the physical words, we'll look at the intention. Just like we use these other metaphors where the basic quality is that you can't look at the simple meaning of the word, but you have to look what's intended by those words. But it's different in what we've been mentioning of the simple comparison. Torah al hamukuvan b'haro mikris al tzad hadimya kamosh zacharnu. Like the ones we were just telling you, we're using words because of a certain comparison that that can draw from it. Okay, like we said, fields don't clothe themselves, but we can understand the comparison and move it over to fields we're trying to explain. But zehamin, this category, ein hamila mora ella al mashuhu horosa ha'atzmis be'emes. It's really talking, it's saying what it means. Omnam kavanasenu al ma shalo tu skab devarav shuhu ahefech. But our kavana is actually to say the opposite. Well, what does that mean? Okay. Derech mashal. Here's his mashalim. Just going to close that. Derech mashal. the Maimra of Eliyahu, when he says, Koru b'kol gadol, there's a kol gadol who's speaking, yell out in a loud voice, Ki Elohim Hu. Did I bring that? I thought I did bring it. Yeah. Okay. I brought it, and let's just see what he first said, and then we'll look at it, okay? Okay. Hine, what's happening here, we'll go into it in 1 second. Eliyahu has this confrontation with Baal, and he says to the people, you know, shout a little louder to your Avodah Zarah, you know, shout a little louder. Actually, his intention is not to tell them to go worship their idols with a louder voice. But you won't see the intention in these words. Ella hu haya omer ki Elohim hu. When he says, shout to your gods because, raise your voice because it's your God, right? He says ki Elohim hu. Hakavanaso hu lo Elohim hu. He's really making fun of them, right? V'chein marma, let's look at that. Okay, I think he's going to explain it first, and then he's going to give a little introduction, then he's going to explain it a little better, so I'm going to do it. So, okay, so the point is the words that he's not telling the people what he means. I mean, the literal words are saying, come on, shout a little louder to your idols. Come on, they're your gods, shout a little idols. But what he's doing is giving them a shtach. He's scoffing them. He's saying, these idols are not going to answer you. Okay? So the words that he's saying are totally opposite to what he means. He really is trying to tell them that you're a bunch of fools. Why are you doing that? Stop, worshiping idols. Okay? But it's the opposite of what he actually says, because he simply says, shout to your God because, maybe just can't hear you. V'chein hamar in Yeshaya, it also says, Amdi na b'chavarayach, ulai techoli hoel, ulai taritz. Okay, I want to see this in 1 second. Go to your friends now. See if they'll help you. Kavana shelo toil v'lo taritz. We're just really trying to say is that your friends are not going to help you at all. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this, and then we'll look at the text fully inside. This category of irony, which is using words and not intending what you really mean, that's why it's like ataka, okay? You don't mean that the fields can, when Hashem puts his hand in Mitzrayim, you don't mean he has a hand, right? So to here, you don't really mean physically what you says, but there's two types. Harishon, Kesha nitzchak b'shamenu v'namar lo devarim shekavonas abam lahefech. When we're laughing at the people who are listening, and we're saying words which mean the opposite of what we mean. But in this first type, ach nigla u'meforsam hakavana, it's clear that we're saying the opposite of what we mean, and we're making fun of the people. How? B'tenua sma shenischa be'ledavrenu, with some sort of action that will accompany what we're saying. O be'eza mila shenasim b'dibor atzmo ba'ofen shelo yeteh shomei likshov shema shebelibenu huma shebefinu. Or we add a certain word that the listener will understand, and he won't make any mistake and say, well, maybe he really means literally what he says. And that's called a skulk, ridicule. And here's the mashal. A mashal is Divrei Zvul El Gaal. Okay, so that I did bring that. When he says, Aye Eifu Picha, Seina Atav Nelachem. So here's what's going on out there with Zvul. So Zvul says to him, where's your mouth? That you used to say, who's Abimelech, that we should serve him? Is not this the people that you have despised? Go out now and fight with them. In other words, he wasn't literally saying, where's your mouth? He's saying, where's your mouth, right? You told me that Abimelech was a nobody, and he was no one to serve. Now all of a sudden he's coming with his army and chasing you, and all of a sudden you have nothing to say. So I'm not really asking you literally, where's your mouth? Okay. I mean, you understand what I'm saying. You understand that I'm saying that, you know, you were a big talker before. Now you're not saying, not doing anything. So get out there and go fight him. Okay. So the words "where your mouth" I'm not asking you that literally. I'm saying, you know, you used to talk really big. Now, Lamaisa, you have to produce. So, but that's understood. The person who was listening here understood that he was being taunted. Okay, very good. So that's the first type. The second type is where the people don't know you're fooling them. Okay, you're mocking them. Okay, so the first one, I like that word, maybe taunting, was maybe you're taunting them. But the second one is where they don't really get it. Okay, and like people who are worshiping the Baal maybe even start, you know, jumping up higher and then louder, and they don't get the point. Hasheni hu shenemar b'derech b'davar b'derech lo tigaleh b'vana. The second one is you don't spill the cards. Clearly, you don't show the people that you're just making fun of them. V'yeruma hashomea b'chashvo shemadaber tocho kaburo, and you fool the listener into believing that you're really tocho kaburo, you really mean what you say. Ukamashal shahavinu lamala me'eliyahu v'nikra chitu. Okay. Ukamamara kasvalav yichtu behem Eliyahu. Let's look at that in Malachim. Okay. So Eliyahu said to the, okay, there's a big showdown here of Eliyahu and Har Carmel, you know, with the Baal, and, you know, they each pick an idol, and it's king with the Baal. So what does he say here? He says, first of all, choose for yourself a bull and prepare it first, since you are the majority, and call it in the name of your deity, and fireplace not. In other words, don't put any fire there. Just let your God come down and take it up. So they took the bull and he gave them, and they prepared it, and they called in the name of Baal from the morning until noon. So all day they were yelling, "Come on, Baal, you know, produce, let a fire come down and burn it up." And they kept saying, "Oh, Baal, answer us." But there was no voice and no answer. And they hoped on the altar that they had made. Okay, and it was at noon that Eliyahu scoffed them and said, "Call with a loud voice, for he is a god." So he told them, you know, maybe you guys are just not yelling louder. You're not, you know, yelling loud enough. Okay? Call with an answer, for he's God. He's your God. You just call louder. Perhaps he's talking, or perhaps he's pursuing enemies, or he's on a journey. Perhaps he's sleeping and will awaken. Maybe he doesn't hear you because he's busy, you know. He's you know, fighting some enemies, or on a journey, or maybe sleeping, and you have to wake him up. And what did they do? And they called with a loud voice and gnashed themselves, as was their custom, with swords and lances until blood gushed on them. So they said, "Hey, that's a good idea." So they yelled even louder, and then they took out their knives and everything, started cutting themselves up because it wasn't working. So it wasn't clear to them that Eliyahu was fooling them, you know, was making fun of them. So that's the second type, he said. So the first type, it's clear, you know, where's your mouth now? He understands, okay, now it's a time that I have to put up or shut up. I've been saying bad things about every now I have to go out. So the message was clear, okay, and the words were not meant to be taken literally. Where's your mouth? Well, it's underneath my nose, okay? But in the second one, you don't, the people who you're listening to don't get the message you're making fun of them. Okay, like this case in Eliyahu. every time he said Rachel Avoida, they did, and he was just making a fool out of him.
I guess they didn't detect the sarcasm in his voice.
Oh, sarcasm, exactly.
Because that's
right,
what
exactly.
it is. It's being sarcastic. It's not. It's the word that the Ramchal uses is irony, but really we would call it sarcasm in this particular case.
Right. So again, that's a good point you're making. Also, it takes in our common, in other words, it takes time to find a specific dictionary meaning of these words, and a lot of times in common language, irony, sarcasm is used in a very loose way. Okay, so it's good that you mentioned that word, sarcasm, being sarcastic, right? Using sarcasm, usually the person who is listening doesn't get the point, usually. And that's the point. So that's called a tool. Okay, there's two types. So let's see if we can go a little further. Now he's going to tell us the min hasheni, the second type of this category. And these have, this is what I did. I had this whole discussion when we first put out Director Funos, what words to use. There's certain words which are very technical, like this word metanami, which I never heard of in my life, and which is translated here, which actually is a word. It's in English. I mean, it's in the English language, just very, very hardly used. So we always had this problem in producing the Sefer, whether to use the technical word, the technical jargon, or to use a word that might have more sense to the listener. So the first time around, that's what we did. I think Zachton changed his tune later on. I mean, the Ramchal says you should try to take easier words that are known, but the problem with the easier words, you have to define them, and if a person wants to look for examples, he sometimes can't find them. So anyway, won't make a long story short, here's the technical word for this type of move. Okay. Okay. So the min hasheni shel hataka hu keshiyikach davar haros al davar acher mitzad kesher ma sheyesh lo imo. When you use a word because it has a certain relationship to another concept, for instance, derech mashal, keshiyikach hasiba ala musubav, when you take the cause and you call it by the result, or lehefech, or the makom al mashabo, or you use the place when you're really talking about the people of the place. Or the matzaveh ala ose, or you use the person who is commanding to talk about the one who is commanded. Here's his mashalah. Hamashal is Shenema Yeshaya. We talk about the book of the prophet, that's Yeshaya, or the book of Shmuel, right? So we sometimes just call it Yeshaya or Shmuel. So that's really the Siba. So we're using the person who wrote the book, and we're calling the book by his name. Okay. V'akavana al svarim shechubarim Yeshaya v'Shmuel. Okay. So I say, hand me a Yeshaya, or hand me a Shmuel. Okay. So we don't need the prophet. We're using the word in its metaphoric sense, and saying that this book is a book written by Yeshaya, and now it gets the name of that. Okay. The Torah talks about Kiryat Ne'emanah. That's a place. It's a city of the faithful. V'hakavana at Anshe Amana. So we're not really talking about the place when we say Kiryat Ne'emanah. We're talking about the people of the place. They are people of Amunah. So these people that have Amunah, so we're going to call it the city of Amunah, Amunah city. But so we gave the city a name because of the people in the city. Or, as we just said before, Aye Efu Picha, where's your mouth? V'akavana Imre Picha. When we say where's your mouth here, we're saying, come on, speak up. We're not saying where's your mouth, literally, but we're also we're telling him we're using a question form to tell him, well, come on, speak up now. What happened? You were saying all these bad things about Avimelech, so let's hear what you have to say now. Okay, so that's whenever we use let's see, machlif of, we change or we give the name of the book, for instance, by the one who wrote it, or we give the name of the city by the people who live there. Okay. What's the min shlishi? Chenizker, and this is also a word I never knew. Where you take a chelek miklal rishon, v'navin bo es klal kulo. You take a certain part of a category and you understand that it really means the whole category. Derech mashal. In Tehillim it says, Nosen lechem v'kol basar. Hashem gives food to all flesh. The kavana with the word lechem is kol minimazam. That just means he gives bread, right? So even I translated it as he gives food. It's not true. He gives, literally it means he gives bread to all flesh. So what the real kavanah is, he gives food to all flesh. Okay. Kol mini mazon, ubasa balei chaim, and when he uses the word flesh also, flesh is only a part of animals, right? But it's understood that you take this part and you're using this part as if it were a whole. So that's the second type of metaphor here, which you use a part of a whole, like lechem, to represent all food. What?
How do you say that in English? Synecdoche?
That's what it is. Your guess is as good as mine. Synecdoche, yeah. Said it. Like I said,
I looked up menonymity, and they have it.
Yeah.
They give examples even on the dictionary.
Yeah. No, these are real words, and that's why it's good to have them. How did I do? I looked at this Hebrew, and I looked in Google and tried to see if it gave me any translation. And then I played around a little bit. So these are technical language. We're just not aware of that.
Right.
So that's why it's good, because you have technical world and you get a lot of different examples. I think they said, for instance, Hollywood, right? Hollywood. Hollywood is the place where the movies are made, right?
Right.
But Hollywood means a movie, the movie industry, right?
Right.
So, or the last one, when we say Frigidaire, I know people still say that. Frigidaire was a type, well, maybe the first type of refrigerator. The real word is refrigerator. But the Frigidaire now, which is part of the class, has become the name of the class. Okay? So when you say to someone, open up the Frigidaire, you don't say, well, I don't have a Frigidaire. I have an Amco, whatever, Amano, whatever. So we understand that. Okay, so that's the other use of comparisons. Okay, the min hasheni. Okay.
There's a lot of noise in the background for some reason.
There's noise in the background?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't know.
Hold on.
Sounds like things are moving around.
Oh, you know what that is? I didn't close my back window. I did close it. There's a bus standing. That week. Is there still noise happening?
Yeah, like there's a lot of background noise. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't do too much with that. I closed the window, and that must be a traffic jam or something.
No, it sounds like electronic noise. It's like the wire for your headset near the power supply or something like that.
Oh, that could be this computer problem. Is that any better? I'm just moving that away from the computer.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think a little bit better.
Okay, it could be the computer. That could be. All right. Let's say that. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's start at least this next little paragraph. Let's see if I have I get my chart back. And you know where everything is put on my computer. Okay. Well, one of the things about a computer is that it works on the cloud and prod principle, right? If you have your hard disk organized properly, so then there should be general principles, subcategories.
Right.
Okay. All right. So here's our chart again. Let's just see where we're going. Yeah. Okay, so we finished this branch here. We're trying to understand how to communicate clearly, and we're trying to understand, and he told us the first thing is you have to use the proper words in the proper place. That's the first rule. The second one is we're going to have to appeal to metaphor. Now we're going to do the third box here, which is called comparison. Okay, we're going to use comparisons, which are going to be either saying something is because it's like something else, or saying something is because it's the opposite of something else. Okay, so we'll be going down this part of the flowchart. Let's see what he has to say here. See, without this little chart, it's very hard to keep track of where you are unless you really memorized everything. So, Baruch Hashem, we have the chart. Okay, and that happened to have been correct. That is a C. Okay, I thought it was an A because of a new paragraph, but it is a C. Ha'orech hu hana'ir al haskalas ha'inyan ma al yedei na'arochim lo. So this using comparisons now is to enlighten the mind by appealing to something that is equivalent to it. And there's going to be two types, as we just showed you on the chart, the domim and the hefchim. Either your concept will be like another concept, a mamatzinu, or it'll be the opposite of a concept. Ukvar higdamnu b'perek gimel shezeh yaseh. We explained this a little in perek gimel. Bios nasu asher nirtze lahudia hiyos b'noseinu yoter mefursam b'nosei domalo. Well, you want to explain a certain a predicate about your subject, but that predicate is more clearly understood in another subject. So you're going to bring that other subject in to explain your subject, because over there it's much more clearly stated. Okay, so that's one reason that we're going to use these dimyonos. שמכוח עריך שני הפכים, זה לעומת זה יכיר ויסגלה יותר ההפרש ביניהם. Or I may want to explain my subject by using the polar opposite, and by showing you the polar opposite, you'll be able to understand much more about what I am talking about. Okay, what I mean to say. So let's get to, I remember Rev Weinstock said that when it came to Yesro, it says, what did Yesro hear and you know, to come to Har Sinai, and except to be Jewish, well, the Goyim didn't hear it. So it says either heard the Torah was given, or he heard Yetzias Mitzrayim, or he heard the Battle of Amalek. So he said, why would someone hearing that Amalek came and tried to destroy us motivate someone to become Jewish? So he said, because when he saw how the opposite of Torah, what the opposite of Torah leads to, in the case of a Malach coming and trying to destroy Kedusha women and children, so he ran to the other opposite. So sometimes by understanding an opposite, you can understand the thing itself. Or in brachot, for instance, in the morning when we say brachas, we say Shelo asani isha, shelo asani goy, so shelo asani ovet. We speak in the negative, so to understand the positive qualities that we do have, the mitzvahs, we have so many more mitzvahs, we look at those poor people that don't have as many mitzvahs, and we say, wow, I'm glad you gave me these great mitzvahs, and by all these much more mitzvahs than other people, and then I can really enjoy them. So sometimes we can learn from the opposite. When we appeal to the opposite, we understand our subject much more clearly. So that's what he's going to be going into now. Dimyan and Hefech. Okay, so he says like this: Hadimyan yaseh b'shnei drachim, v'nikra shalem and bilti shalem. There's two types of comparisons. Certain ones are called complete, and certain ones are called incomplete. What's called a shalem? Hashalom sheyuzkaru hadomim v'hadimyon. The shalom is where you clearly mention what the comparison is and what in other words, your subject and the comparison together. Perisho. For ma yizdameh. You mention your subject and you mention what is comparable to. The bilti shalom sheyuzkaru hadomim v'lo hadimyon. You just talk about the comparison, but you don't talk about what you're comparing it to. Okay, now here, by the way, it's different than we just learned, because we learned before your intention is not in your words. Okay, we say the fields are clothed. Clothing, the literal intention is not what you mean. That was metaphor. But here, the comparison is going to be used to help us understand our idea. Here's his examples of the Mashal HaSholem. We say, Ki kashir yored hakashamim v'hasheleg min hashamayim v'shama lo yagzor kain yiyeh divarai lo yeshuv elai. Okay, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, just like the rains come down and they never come back, my words also, when they come back, they never are taken away. Okay, so there's a comparison here between rain and the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's words. And both the words and what they're compared to come totally spelled out. Okay. Kashir yimotzei haterish be'eshkol, like you'll find the grapes in their clothes. Kain a'aseh lemana v'adi. Just like that I will do for you. In other words, just like the teva, the grapes come and they turn into, from little flowers into little balls and then finally into beautiful grapes, so too you'll see that my words also will come to fruition. It may take you a little time or not. But again, so both the case that you're talking about, its comparison totally spelled out. Okay, ki shamayim ka'asham nimlechu va'aretz mibeged tivalu kave Hashem yachlifu koach ya'alu aver kenasharim. Okay, you can help me on this one. This one I didn't look up all the sources. I'll do it next time because that's what we have to do. He says, just like the shamayim will turn to dust and will be full of salt, and the earth will be like a worn out piece of clothes, or when, excuse me. You should...
Right. Like those who seek Hashem, their strength will be exchanged, right?
So what's it mean? Ya'alu evu kenasharim, and they will go up like an esher, like
an eagle.
So, yeah. So what is the nimshal and mashal here?
I think you have these contrasts, right? Just like
this is learned from the opposite.
Right.
Go ahead.
The Shemayim You see the contrast that the heaven will turn into smoke, and the earth will disintegrate like a beged. But the Koivei Hashem, those who seek Hashem, they will be exchanged with strength. They'll also be changed.
Very good. Excellent. Beautiful. No, they will be just the opposite.
Right.
Right? They'll be achlifu koach. I mean, just, or maybe, is it a comparison of the opposite? I think you were right with the opposite, right?
Well, I think
even though the heavens and the earth may be totally exhausted, those that trust in Hashem, their energies will change from total destruction to power if they trust in me.
Right, I think that's the shot.
Is that the point? I think so. Okay.
Where is this pasuk? Sounds very familiar. It's like an haftarah somewhere.
Yeah, I didn't have time because of all my wonderful work this week to get this far. But what I do is I look up all the sources, and then if they're easy, we can leave them. But if they're difficult, like this one, but okay. Anyway, okay. So so that's called a shalom because he spells out the mashal and the nimshal, so to speak. It's not really a mashal and nimshal. I shouldn't use that word. The case and its comparison. Okay, the two. The cases here are not mishalim. They're real. Okay, we're just saying, just like the heavens fall. Like the rains fall, my words, when they fall to the word, just like the rains fall, they never go back up, so my words fall, never go back. So we're not using a mushal in the sense of, we're talking about the physical rain now. We're not meaning something else in what we're saying, okay? But we're spelling out, I want to tell you about my words, Kodesh Baruch Hu says, that they'll never be retracted. So I'm going to use a comparison. Well, you know how rains come down, never go up, well, my words will also be the same. So that's the difference here than what we were studying before, because here the comparison is real. We mean what we say. It's just that we're appealing to another case to explain what we need. Okay. So what's the bilti shalom here, the second category? Veihi kana shalomecha, your peace will be like a river. V'sidkosecha kagale hayam, and your righteousness will be like the waves of the ocean. In this case, he says, Hiskir hadomim vehem hasholem v'hanahar. The two subjects we're talking about are shalom, shalom and nahar. That's the things that we're comparing it to, right? V'lo hadimyon elamuvan me'alav shehu b'ribui. But the dimyon, when we say your peace will be like the river, so even though we didn't, well, what is it in the river that your peace will be like? So we don't mention it, but we understand it means that it'll be abundant. V'amnam yemotze dimyon lo yuskar bo dimyono ela be'echad hanosim lo b'sheni. So he says that you can find a dimyon that's mentioned in one subject and not in the second. Derech mashal, v'ha rishonim kiyam nir nigrash, ki hashket lo yuchal. So let's see what that is. So there we mentioned we're talking about the rishonim, and it's comparing the rishonim to a tempestuous ocean that never finds peace. So the Rishonim, which is our subject, is compared to the tempestuous ocean, but doesn't spell out, just like the tempestuous ocean never finds peace, so the Rishonim will also never find peace. Okay.
So why is that? So we have to know why that's.
We'll take this up, Blinetta, next week.
Right. We have to understand why this is called the shalom. Why this is called the shalom.
Right. So like next week, Blinetta Bezrat Hashem, we'll go into this and we'll get the sources and we'll be much more careful and understand what's shalom and what's bilti shalom about it. Okay. Let's stay there.
Okay.
So let's wish everyone a good week.